Hi guys. Well, we're going to talk about NI again. I know this has been a very front and center concern of mine, but I dare believe that this might be an interest of yours too. By the way, I'm trying a new lightning, interesting Freudian slip, a new lighting arrangements because I tend to think that later in the day my background tends to be kind of gray and bleak. So let me know if this works or if this looks pretty dreadful, in which case I won't attempt that again. Again, it's usually later in the day when I haven't had the opportunity to record a video before that. So I'm interested in your point of view. I want to talk about NI dominance, again from the perspective of, this opposition that we often hear between NI divergence and NI convergence. So supposedly, NI has this kind of divergent mode of thinking, whereas NI has a more convergent mode of thinking and arriving at particular conclusions. Now, that can be misleading as terminology, of course. Number one, because, a term that's all the rage nowadays that you hear all the time, it both says something very true about people, but it also is trendy to use the term. Both things are true about this particular phenomenon. It's talking about neurodivergence. So neurodivergence certainly exists, man. And it's helped neurodivergent people quite a bit to know that they are neurodivergent. It's usually a source of relief to them to know that they have a particular way of functioning that is often different and not adapted to modes of teaching at school, modes of functioning in the workplace, and so forth. It is helpful to know that. And it's an important diagnosis for people who are in fact neurodivergent. There's lots of ways of being neurodivergent. We won't be going into that right now. I've talked about that a little bit, quite a bit in video content before, even not so long ago. I think I made a video about INFJs and neurodivergence. In any case, of course, insofar as INFJs, INTJs, as the two NI-dominant types, insofar as they can certainly be neurodivergent, in fact, very often neurodivergent, it's tempting to think that there is sometimes it's tempting to think that there is a nearly one-to-one, correspondence between NI and neurodivergence. It's probably not true, but it's a tempting thought, and I'm sure it's occurred to more than a few NI dominants, not just me. And I know it's not just me because I've talked to other INFJs who've had the same thought. It's not the case. It's not mapping the same thing, but the overlap is undeniable. But of course, when you talk about neurodivergent INFJs, well, you're talking about INFJs and INTJs who are divergent. So are they divergent or are they convergent? I mean, some solution needs to be brought into the picture here, particularly if we start from the assumption that it seems there is a strong correlation. Certainly not a total correlation, but there is a strong correlation between NI dominance and neurodivergence. As soon as we start looking more into how NI functions, it becomes quite clear. Also, the fact that it's difficult for neurodivergence to adapt to external reality and its demands, and the fact that external reality is always social reality embedded in a world that is physical. There's a social construction element. The social world dictates how we are to learn, how we are to function, how we are to work. That's how the neurodivergent person hits against the wall often, right? Because society is regimented currently in such a way that it's hard for them to thrive, right? Unless some adjustments are made. So it seems as if, in some way, NI dominants are not convergent, but divergent. It all depends on what we're talking about. In the case of NI dominance, it seems that, there's no need to worry too much about convergence. Divergence is fitting the bill. But in the case of NI dominance, it seems there's both a sense in which NI dominants are convergent, and another sense that I just mentioned there, in which, from a certain point of view, at least a sizable portion of the NI dominant population is divergent. So how can we combine those two insights? Or how can we make sense of the fact that NI is convergent? Despite a lot of NI people, a lot of NI family members being neurodivergent. An easy answer would be say, well, neurodivergence is about your neurological attributes. It's not about your ideation. It's not about your intuition. So you draw a semantic distinction to clarify things. To some extent, this distinction works, right? But at the same time, it doesn't satisfy me completely. Okay, neurodivergence means, from that perspective, that neurodivergent people are divergent in the sense that they diverge from the norm. They're not divergent in themselves or in their ideation, they diverge from the norm. That is true, but there's something else. I cannot help but think that divergence is also part of what it means to be neurodivergent. It's not just about diverging from the norm. There is what I like to call a drifting. Now, that's not a word that I would use in the case of any dominance. Any dominants are properly lateral, like it's hard for them to come back into focus. They're really like lateral in that respect. I think, and this could be a not so convincing analogy, but I'll use it anyway. I think NI dominants are more diagonal than lateral. Like instead of going like, like this from the topic, they go like that, and then they kind of curve and come back. But it's like, this is a drifting. This is what I call, using the metaphor of water or the ocean or the wave, the sort of drifting of the NI dominant. It comes back gently to focus. But sometimes the coming back gently to focus, when we're experiencing a serious case of a PI rambling, for example, it can take half an hour, it can take an hour. The difference here between the NI dominant and the NI dominant is important, right? The NI dominant, after half an hour or an hour of digressing, of laterally going, veering away from topic, is not going to come back. And it will be creative in its own right, but he's not or she's not going to come back. The NI dominant might take a long time, but will come back. So you see what the difference is between the NI divergence and what we have to call the NI divergence. It's not true that NI start like this and ends up like that. If you're an NI dominant, you know this is not how things work. The reality is it starts like this and it comes back like that. It's almost like an oblong shape, right? So it's better to say that NI is divergent, whereas NI happens in two stages. The full sort of, emergence and reaching toward an end, a closure of the intuitive process in a particular instance of its use. It begins with divergence and it curves back into convergence. The real process is not like this. I think that looks more like SI, to be honest. Okay, this is more SI. This is more NI. There is an expansion and eventually a contraction and a convergence into a point. But it has to take its time. When I say NI takes its time, when I say NI likes to take care of itself, it guides itself, this is what I mean. Because a lot of the time, the INFJ, when they don't trust their NI and make their functions of judgment intervene, if I had to, again, use these rather clumsy hand gestures to illustrate, they see this happening and they're like, oh my God, I'm losing focus. Where am I going? Like I'm turning it into an NI dominant. They don't realize that it belongs to the very DNA of NI to do this. They don't realize, so they have to make the functions of judgment intervene, so they go like this. But in that beautiful curve that is thereby annihilated, like all the juicy intuitions that they could be reaching. And so they bar themselves from that. If you trust this movement, if you trust this is going to happen, and if you trust that it may take a long time, but it will do that, welcome the intuitions and welcome the convergence. So it's not divergence as such. It's not convergence as such. It begins with divergence and ends in convergence. That's what I call NI drifting. Okay. Let me know in the comments what you think, guys, and give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Again, let me know about the lighting. I care about your opinion on this. I happen to have written a couple of books about INFJs. 2 books exactly. The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality, is my book from 2021. You might be familiar with it if you haven't got it yet, but you want to understand the INFJ in a big way, in a deep way, you should get this book. All right. Enough said, check the link below. Its sequel, it's also a really juicy book, a really good book, The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World. Now, this brings the INFJ mind that's looked at in the Ecstatic Soul and into the world, often experienced as hostile by INFJs, and for good reason. And yet this is our world. We have to find ways of being happy in our world, of being fulfilled and finding purpose. This book explores all of that. You should have a look. You might just want to get it. The first link below is to The Infinite Soul, guys. Of course, these two books are part of the same family. It should be obvious. My next book is going to be on NI itself. As usual, guys, the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. I very much depend on your kind donations. I could not do it without you, so please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is below. You get some really cool perks too, like access to my Discord server, to our Discord server, that we're almost 50 now. It's called The Fourfold. I'm there almost every day, pretty much every day. You can interact with me there and ask for, mention the topic that you want to see me covered in the bonus videos, which is another perk that I release every 2 or 3 weeks on a topic of your choosing, and I go in depth about that topic. If that sounds good to you, see you there. In the meantime, take care and see you soon, guys. Bye-bye.